Ladies and gentlemen, I am a Pokémon fan. Yes, I love Pokémon. I've been a huge fan of Pokémon ever since I was a little kid and all the way up to my late 20s. Is that a good thing? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. You'd be the judge of that. In any case, I've recently been inspired to make my own version of a Pokemon game, Pokemon region, I should say, and I've decided to actually make the whole thing a YouTube video and just, help get the word out there. A couple of things I have to mention first before we go on. I'm not really the best speaker. I'm not really the best at speaking words. I love to talk. It's just actually speaking in an elegant and eloquent highbrow way is just not my thing. So fair warning, I might actually stumble over my words a couple of times during this video. But let's get started. So a couple of weeks ago, a YouTuber by the name of Lockstin and Noggin decided to make a Pokemon region based on where he lives, the Pacific Northwest. I watched that video and I really liked it, and I got inspired to make a video about where I live, Israel. It's gonna have a few influences from the Middle East and the Mediterranean area, but for the most part, it will be specifically focused on Israel, the country that I was born in and I still live in to this day. Now, the region is going to be called the Molash region. Molash is the word shalom, spelled backwards. In Hebrew, that is, not in English, because because shalom is a Hebrew word. Anyways, shalom is the Hebrew word for hello, but it's also the Hebrew word for peace. As in, when we greet someone, when we say hello, we extend our hand and say peace. We extend our peace to anyone we meet. So that's basically the word shalom, and the region will be called Molash, which is shalom spelled backwards. And hey, if a Hawaiian region can be named Alola, which is not subtle at all, I think I can get away with naming my region Molash. In any case, this is more or less a map of the region. This is the rough idea, the rough sketch of the region that I'm planning to make. It's not a final thing yet. I haven't really got anyone to actually draw the map for me. It's just a rough thing that I did on Photoshop. As you can see, it's basically the country of Israel, except I made a few changes. I took the Golan Heights and put it on top of the map, which kind of makes it in between Haifa and Tiberias, and it kind of looks like it's wearing a kippah, which is the traditional Jewish hat wear, so it kind of works. I also really shortened up the Negev region. I apologize for that, Dad. But yeah, the thing is, the road from Beersheba, the city where I live, and Eilat, the most southern city in Israel, is really long. And the whole idea of Pokemon is that the player kinda has to traverse this whole area on foot and sometimes on a bike. So to make it realistically like the way it is in real life, it just wouldn't be practical. So I had to shorten it up a bit and make the journey a little less tedious. Of course, the biggest change that I've made so far is that I took the island of Cyprus and I brought it much closer to the Israeli western shoreline. So it kind of looks like it's very close to where Tel Aviv is meant to be, and Haifa. I also changed up the island a little bit. I kind of cut off the spike from the island and I kind of inverted it so it still looks like Cyprus, but not entirely like Cyprus, so that I can kind of get away with using that. And I apologize for the Cyprian people. I hope they forgive me, but see, the thing is, I'm a huge fan of this early idea that was in some of the more earlier regions of Pokemon, where there was an entire area that you had to traverse water in order to get to, sort of like Cinnabar Island, Cianwood Town, and Dewford Island. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of that, and I kind of wish they brought it back. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the fact that HMs are no longer an issue in Pokemon games. It's just, I kind of like the idea that there's an island off the shore of the coast of the region that you kind of have to traverse water in order to get to and progress through the story. Don't worry, it'll be accessible pretty early on in the story, The story itself is sort of a work in progress, but one thing is for sure, I can tell you that you can actually access this island pretty fast, and you don't have to, like, finish more than 60% of the game in order to get there. But this is basically just the map of the region itself. The most important part, here's what I actually do have that I can share with you guys right now, and I'm actually very excited to do that. The starters! I actually spent a lot of time thinking about what I want the starters to look like, what I want the starters to represent, and I've recently commissioned an artist to help me draw and sort of illustrate my vision of the starters, because I couldn't draw to save my own life, so I kind of preferred if someone else who knows what they're doing will do that. So I'll leave the link in the description for the artist if you want to commission this person yourself. And well, let's get on with the actual starters. First things first, though, there's a couple of things I want to go over. First of all, you'll notice that Israel is mostly divided into 3 distinct segments. There's the lush green forested area of the north, there's the barren desert of the south, and there's the urban, densely populated area to the center. And I wanted the starters to represent that. I wanted each of the starters to represent a different part of the country, as you'll see in just a minute. Also, there's this kind of unwritten rule. It's considered by some people to be a myth, but I personally really like that idea, and I consider it to be extremely true, is that each starter family has a theme behind it. For example, all the grass starters kind of represent ancient or extinct animals that went extinct millions, if not thousands of years ago. The fire starters mostly represent creatures from the Chinese zodiac, and the water starter, which was the toughest one to nail down, they actually represent amphibian, semi-aquatic creatures that live both on land and in the water, but also they represent either a weapon or a warrior class. And that was one of the hardest things to kind of move around and force into my starters, but I think I did a pretty good job, all things considered. So without further ado, let's jump into the first grass starter, Gramelon, the Hump Pokemon. As you can see, it's a camel, and I mentioned earlier in this video that I did kind of get this idea from Loxton and Noggin, that YouTube channel. Well, he also had a camel in mind, more specifically a Camelops, which is an ancient ancestor of both camels, llamas, and alpacas. Fun fact, camels didn't actually originate in the Middle East. They actually started in North America, and over the course of millions and millions of years, they migrated through Asia all the way to North Africa. And nowadays, they're mostly synonymous with the Middle East. More specifically, one-humped camel, which is what this Pokemon is kind of meant to represent. This Pokemon's name comes from grass, more specifically camel grass, gamal, which is the Hebrew word for camel, and lon, which is kind of Israeli slang for something that's really small, like, for example, an elephant, pil, a small elephant, pilon, a camel, gamal, a small camel, gamalon. Also, gamlon is the Hebrew word for pediment, which is the triangular piece of these Greek/Roman temples. The Greeks and Romans actually do have a big part to play in in the history of Israel, so it kind of makes sense, I suppose. Also, finally, its name is also kind of sounds like gremlins. Not so much the urban legend of the creatures that devour planes and stuff. More specifically, the movie Gremlins and Gremlins 2. I really liked that movie, and without really realizing it, when I came up with the name Gramelon, I kind of sounded a bit like Gremlin, so I kind of decided to make it a part of this Pokemon's origin. Also, in the second Gremlins movie, there is one Gremlin that actually drinks a potion that makes vegetables grow on its body, so I guess it kind of works. In any case, you can kind of see the gremlin inspiration of it, especially with the ears. It has gremlin-type ears, similar to the gremlins in the movie, and also kind of has this mischievous smile on its face. It's kind of a part of its personality. Also, you'll notice that its fur is mostly made up of camel grass, and it has a pediment on its back as a hump. Another very interesting thing to point out about this Pokemon is that it clearly doesn't have a tail. And there is a reason for that. You see, every starter family has to have some unique theme that unites all 3 starters together. And I kind of decided to go all out on this, especially with the grass starter. See, this Pokemon is primarily based on an old Bedouin folktale. Bedouins are nomads who live all across the Middle East, and especially in Israel, and they live very closely with camels. So there's an old Bedouin folktale about a Bedouin merchant who had his camel stolen by bandits. So he hired 3 Bedouin trackers to help him track down his stolen camel. Bedouins are primarily known for their expert level tracking ability. There's even an entire division in the Israeli army dedicated to just Bedouin trackers. But enough of that for a second. So back to the story. After he hired all 3 of these trackers to find his missing camel, one of the Bedouin trackers proclaimed, "This camel doesn't have a tail." How did he know that? Well, it's because the camel's droppings were scattered all over the road, as opposed to being in a mostly straight line, which is something that happens because the camel's tail kind of directs the droppings to fall in a straight line. Anyways, he proclaimed the camel doesn't have a tail, and as you can see, Gremlin doesn't have a tail. So that's it for the first evolution, but it's going to get a bit more complicated as we move on. So I really like this guy, and what I love most about it is how the final evolution turned out, and I really can't wait for you guys to see it. But let's table that for now and move on to the fire starter. Introducing Smeel, the Veal Pokemon. Now, as you'll notice, it's clearly a bowl, and yeah, so I do realize that True Green 7 actually did start to make his own version of Pokemon region based on his ideas, and he did also choose a bull, and I have fully admitted that I took the camel idea from Loxton and Noggin, but I honestly did not know that True Green 7 was making a Pokemon region of his own, and he used a bull. I have no way to back this up, but I actually did come up with this idea a full week and a half before that YouTube video comes up, so I hope nobody accuses me of stealing his idea. But just listen to me for a second. Once you'll actually get to know the story of why I chose specifically a bull, you'll know that I had absolutely nothing to do with his idea. So why a bull? Well, like I said, fire starters are primarily based on animals from the Chinese zodiac, and there aren't really a lot of options. The only Pokemon that haven't been picked yet are a snake, a horse, a sheep, and obviously a bull. All 4 of these are animals that would have worked perfectly for a region based on Israel, but I specifically chose a bull because it actually appears in 2 completely different zodiacs. There's the Chinese zodiac, and there's, the regular zodiac. So I kind of thought that once Generation 12 comes around, and they've already used up all the potential fire starters that they can use, they can kind of shift over and start using animals from the other zodiac. And I'm pretty sure that almost all of the star signs from that particular zodiac can be made into fire starters with no problem, except Pisces and Aquarius. Yeah, don't ask me how they're gonna make those into fire starters. Flaming fish? A bucket that spews water? I don't know. That's up for Game Freak to decide, and that's years and years down the line. Anyways, its name, Smeel, comes from small, smoke, smoked, smoldering, and veal. Yeah, I put a lot of effort into that name, actually. It is a veal, as you can see, and veal is the young version of a baby bull or a baby cow. I realize that it's often named a calf, but it could also be a veal, so I just chose veal instead. Also, True Green 7 decided to call his fire starter Smokeass, so I couldn't really take that anyway. Right, so this entire family line kind of represents the evolution of forest fire. It starts out pretty small, and it slowly gets bigger and bigger as it goes on, and if left unchecked, it becomes a huge forest fire that destroys an entire ecosystem. But we're not there yet, right? But right now we're at the earlier stage of a forest fire. The smoke, or rather smoldering fire. Small fire. Small veal. Smoke. Yeah, the names kind of juggle around when talking about this Pokemon. As you can see, this Pokemon's tail, and yes, that is its tail. It's not a fart. It's a tail that it's kinda shaped like a small trail of smoke. But why, again, why specifically a bull? Well, bulls and cows and other types of cattle actually live a lot, actually pretty common in the Golan Heights, which is located in the north of Israel. So, yeah, it kind of fits. And also, as this Pokemon gradually evolves, it'll make much more sense why I specifically went for a bull as the fire starter. But yeah, also, smoked veal. Smoked tuna is actually a pretty common source of food among Israeli soldiers when on the field. There's not a lot of food options when you're on field missions, and one of the more common food sources, at least that's what it was when I was in the army. One of the more common sources of food is actually tuna. So what Israeli soldiers normally do is they just take some toilet paper and put it all over the tuna. Let the paper absorb the oil from the tuna can and just burn it, and voila, a smoked tuna meal. Now, a couple of Israeli tourists actually tried that in South American country, Peru, I believe, a couple of years ago, and they accidentally burned an entire forest to the ground. Twice. Even to the point where Israeli tourists are no longer allowed in those specific forests. But yeah, that's more or less the idea I was going for. A forest fire that, if left unchecked, can burn an entire stretch of land, unfortunately. So yeah, keep your eyes open for this Pokemon's evolutionary line. I think you're gonna like the final evolution as it gradually evolves. Moving on, we have the water starter, Cluinch, the river crab Pokemon. As you can see, it is a crab. Now, I'm gonna let you guys in on a little bit of a secret here. This was actually the hardest one to pick because, like I said, it has to be a semi-aquatic creature that can live both on land and in the water, and also as it gradually evolves, it needs to represent a weapon, but that's later down the evolutionary line. But the biggest question to me, which animal am I going to use? Which semi-aquatic amphibian type creature should I use? That also kind of represents Israel. Specifically, the central area of Israel. At one point I had considered using an alligator, but then there's Totodile, so I couldn't really use that. I also considered using a frog, but then there's Froakie. I also considered using a turtle, but then there's Squirtle. So yeah, I didn't really have a lot of options. In fact, even less options than I did with the fire starter. But eventually I realized the answer was kind of staring me in the face. River crabs. River crabs are actually pretty common, and also they can live on land and at sea. And also some crabs can live both on water, both in fresh water and salt water. But not river crabs. That's specifically where the name river crab comes into. But since they're Pokemon, they can live in any body of water that they choose. In any case, the name Cluinch comes from claw, clem, clamp, blue, clue, and pinch, which is what crabs do. They pinch. See? It's a pinch. I specifically wanted pinch to be in the name, and the other words kind of came later. In any case, it's a crab. It has claws, and when it uses its claws, it clamps on stuff. It also uses its clams to shatter clamps, which is primarily what crabs eat. Also, blue, because it lives in the water, so it's blue. And also, clue. That one actually came as a part of the name that I didn't notice, kind of like Gramelon, but then I decided to make it a part of this Pokemon's personality, which is that it's curious. It loves to search for clues. It's very detective-like, a very young detective. That's why its eye stalks are shaped like magnifying glasses, because it's curious. It's like a little crab detective, and it's kind of cute like that. This Pokemon is actually very curious and very friendly, and it kind of likes to investigate things, even when it gets it into trouble, as you'll see with its later evolutions. But we'll get to that later. Right now, this is Cluinch. It's a river crab, and it's cute, and it likes to investigate things. Also, keep an eye out for its eyes. Its eyes are actually very important. This Pokemon actually represents eye deterioration. Eyes that start out pretty healthy, they can see everything with no problem, but over time the eyesight kind of deteriorates until eventually you need to wear glasses because you can't really quite see as well. So that's why these Pokemon's eyes are always wide open and they're shaped like magnifying glasses. So this Pokemon can look at things really closely, and it's kind of like a baby. It's very wide-eyed and yeah, it likes to look at things. So, yeah, that's it for Cluinch. But let's go back to the grass starter. Camisole, the camel Pokemon. Its name primarily comes from camel, eye, and Salsola vermiculata. This thing, it's a plant. It's a plant that grows in the desert and camels like to eat it. As a matter of fact, it's pretty good. I tasted it a bit. It's really good. But it's very, very salty, and in the desert, that's not really recommended unless you have a fresh supply of water with you. So I wouldn't recommend dining on one of these. In any case, that's the plant that mostly covers this Pokemon's body, and it actually makes up the hump of this Pokemon. It's no longer a pediment; it's a hump. Its hump is primarily made out of this plant. Also, you'll notice that it has a tail now. This tail is actually an aloe vera. It's a very common desert plant, and like real-world camels, it's actually pretty robust. This plant actually kind of foreshadows this Pokemon's final evolution, which I won't reveal at this point, but let's just say that just like camels, this plant is very robust in the sense that it stores a lot of water inside its own leaves. That's why they don't really require a lot of water. Also, aloe vera has a lot of medicinal properties, once again foreshadowing its final evolution. Also, you'll notice that its eye is now damaged. It has a scar on its eye. That, once again, goes all the way back to that Bedouin folktale that I mentioned earlier, where the second of the trackers announced that this camel is blind in its left eye. How did he know that? Well, I don't exactly remember every single detail about that folktale to a T, but it's something to do with the camel only choosing to eat leaves and plants on the right side of the road, and leaving all the leaves and plants on the left side of the road completely untouched. Or maybe it's the opposite, that it actually bumped into a lot of the leaves and the plants because it couldn't see it because it was blind on its left eye. So, yeah, something like that. The bottom line is this camel was blind in one eye, and this Pokemon actually represents that. It has a scar on its left eye, and it actually can't really see in its left eye. Which brings me to this Pokemon's special ability. All three of the base form starters have the regular abilities that all the starters normally have. Blaze for the fire type, Overgrow for the grass type, and Torrent for the water type. But the middle stages, and more importantly the final stages of these Pokemon, are going to have completely new original abilities that I came up with. And it kind of fits with both the Pokemon concept and what they're based on. This Pokemon special ability is called Sharp Eye. What this means is, you know how they always say that when your body is slowly losing one of its senses, all the other senses get stronger to sort of compensate? This Pokemon can't see out of one eye, so the other eye gets much stronger in order to compensate. Not exactly what really happens in nature, but again, this is Pokemon, and these illogical things can happen. So what this ability really means is, this Pokemon never misses an attack, no matter how many times the opposing Pokemon uses Sand Attack, Double Team, Minimize, or any other type of attack that affects its own evasion or this Pokemon's accuracy. This Pokemon will never miss. So basically, every attack this Pokemon uses is kind of like Aerial Ace or Swift. It never misses, unless of course the Pokemon happens to be using Fly, where it's in the air, Dig, where it's in the ground, or Dive, where it's underwater. So yeah, these are the only three exceptions. The unfortunate setback of this ability is that this Pokemon can never really dodge, with the exception of one-hit KO moves, because that's just, well, it wouldn't really be fair, now would it? So yeah, this Pokemon can never really dodge, and yeah, it never misses, but it also never evades enemy attacks because it can see very good out of one eye, but it can't see out of the other eye. So kind of a give and take with this Pokemon. So yeah, that's it for the middle stage grass starter. Let's move on to the middle stage fire starter. Flattle, the cattle Pokemon. Its name comes from flame, flaming, flat, battle, and cattle. Once again, I did a lot of work on the name of this Pokemon. As you can see, its tail is no longer a trail of smoke. Now it's a full-grown tail that's on fire, kind of like Monferno's tail. The original concept was that its horns and back kind of lights up in fire whenever it gets angry, sort of like the Typhlosion line. But I kind of scrapped that as soon as I saw the artist's rendition of this Pokemon. This Pokemon, while it's still technically a bull, it's also based on a battering ram, which was a device that originated with the ancient Greeks. Remember them? Yeah, like I said, they have a pretty big role to play in the history of Israel. So yeah, a battering ram is a device that's primarily shaped like a ram, and it's used to breaking down walls and doors in order to allow infantry forces to enter. Also, the Greeks and Romans used to have weapons where they light it on fire and then threw it at the enemies. Not particularly battering rams, but still the fire and battering ram kind of actually makes sense for this Pokemon. This Pokemon represents the second stage of a wild forest fire. It's no longer a small, smoldering fire. It is now actual flame, actual wildfire that spreads everywhere it goes, and kind of like a certain virus that we all would want to forget. The more it's allowed to go unchecked, the more it spreads to more places. So, pretty much like a battering ram. This thing just runs through a battlefield, not noticing who or what it's hitting, which actually ties in perfectly to its special ability, Confused Rage. When this Pokemon's HP is really low, let's say below 40% or something like that, this Pokemon receives a massive boost to both special attack, physical attack, and speed. Again, this is a battering ram. It's used to smash through walls with incredible force and speed. So giving it a boost in attack, special attack, and speed makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, though, there is a drawback to this ability, which means that whenever it's in this particular state, it's confused. And this sort of confusion is a little bit different than regular Pokemon confusion from confusion causing move. Just like the regular confusion, sometimes it might hit the target, sometimes it might hit itself. But sometimes it might just completely miss the target at all. And more specifically in double battles and triple battles, and yes, those are back, I'll explain that in a later video, but in double battles and triple battles, sometimes it will attack the wrong target. And on very rare occasions, it'll actually attack allies on its team. But I draw the line at attacking the trainer. That's a little too much. Where is this coming from? Well, like I said, it's a bull. These things can get very dangerous when angry, and can actually kill people. They run into things without really noticing what they're running into, which makes sense for both a bull and a battering ram. Also, when these things are angered, they're filled with a burning rage, which fits perfectly with both fire-type Pokemon and wildfire. So yeah, it all makes sense if you ask me. That's it for the fire starter. Let's move on to the middle stage water starter. Cleanseaver, the Deceiver Pokemon. Originally I called it the Mean Pokemon, but then I kind of figured that mean is a little too simple, so yeah, Cleanseaver. Its name, once again, comes from claw, clam, and clamp, and also Cancer, the star sign that represented by a crab. By the way, my star sign is Cancer, so hello. Also, its name comes from river and deceiver. As you can see, this Pokemon is really not quite as friendly as its predecessor. And there's a really big reason for that. Remember when I said that Cluinch, when it's really young, it's very curious and friendly? Yeah, its curiosity got it into a lot of trouble. As you can see, its body is covered in scars, and it's now kind of angry and mean and distrustful of the world. So after getting itself into so many troubles, it doesn't really trust other people and other Pokemon. And as you can see, it's kind of crying. There's a really big reason for that. And this leads me to this Pokemon's special ability, Mean Spirit. Though this Pokemon is not a Dark type, this ability, Mean Spirit, boosts all Dark type moves that this Pokemon can learn, whether it be through level up or TMs or move tutors or whatever way you can learn Dark type moves. Kinda acts like a stab boost, except it doesn't actually work on only attacking moves. It also works on stats affecting moves. For example, a move like Hone Claws, which boosts the user's attack and accuracy by 1 stage, rather than boosting it by 1 stage, it actually boosts it by 2 stages. A move like Fake Tears, which lowers the target's special defense by 2 stages, it actually lowers it by 3 stages. You get the idea. This ability, Mean Spirit, boosts all Dark type moves. However, there is a bit of a caveat for that. Just like with the other two abilities, it can't be too one-sided with these abilities. So while this ability only boosts Dark type moves for this Pokemon, it only works with High Friendship. You know, Friendship, that one stat that is the bane of a lot of Pokemon trainers' existence. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Pokemon is a franchise all about friendship and learning to work with your Pokemon. And for some reason, a lot of people actually miss that part. So I kind of decided to make this a very important part of this Pokemon's concept. This Pokemon's special ability only activates if it has a high friendship, but not too high friendship, not maximum friendship. I don't want to make this too hard and too challenging for people, so that they won't eventually choose this water starter. I want people to pick all 3 of these starters. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to make people only choose the grass and fire starters just because this Pokemon's special ability doesn't really work for them. So it's not high friendship, just relatively high friendship. And I mean, this Pokemon evolves at level 16, so you gotta have high friendship by then. The one major unfortunate part of this Pokemon's ability is if its friendship is really, really low, it will sometimes act like Ash's Charizard from the first few seasons of the anime. Remember Charizard, where it just straight up refused to attack, and sometimes it even attacked other Pokemon in his party, and sometimes Ash? Again, I draw the line at attacking the trainer. That's not what this game is about, but yeah. If this Pokemon doesn't have high friendship, it'll just be a douche. It'll just refuse to attack. So you gotta make sure to have high friendship with this Pokemon. But not too high. This ability only works for the downside of it, where it just refuses to attack, when its friendship is really, really low, like close to the bottom. So just be friendly to your Pokemon, okay? Also, as you can see, its eyes are red and are watery. Again, this is both a reference to the move Fake Tears. It's also foreshadowing its final evolution, but also it's kind of a reference to what this Pokemon is meant to represent: eyesight deterioration. While Cluench's eyes were wide-eyed and fully healthy, giving it the ability to see pretty much everything very clearly, once you stare at a screen for a little too long, your eyes eventually start to get red and watery. I actually have first-hand experience with that, so don't stare at wide screens for too long, kids. It'll only hurt your eyes. Anyways, let's move on to the final stage of all 3 of these starters. And the fully evolved grass starter is Yasusis! Yeah, I'll admit, the name wasn't the best. And that wasn't really my best thing there with the name of this Pokemon, but trust me, it grows on you. Just like, plants grow. It grows on you. You'll understand where this name comes from. Anyways, Yasusis, the Oasis Pokemon. Its name basically comes from the word Yala, which is an Arabic word that has a lot of meanings, but for this specific context, it's mostly used to direct camels, telling them where to go, when to stop, and that sort of stuff. Yala. Also, the name comes from Susita, which is an old Israeli car model from the 1970s. This car was actually made from fiberglass, which, believe it or not, camels actually used to eat a lot. So, leaving your car in the middle of the desert was basically asking for it to get eaten by a camel. So be mindful of that. Also, sus is the Hebrew word for horse, and horses and camels are kind of similar. They're both riding animals, and they both serve people as a mode of transportation, but also to transport goods and other stuff. Also, Oasis, which is what this Pokemon kind of represents. It's the Oasis Pokemon, except I decided to use a Y instead of an I because sometimes Pokemon's name spelling does that. They spell things weird just because, and well, it's my Pokemon, so I can name it any way I choose to. In any case, now that this Pokemon is fully grown, it's become a healer, a refresher, just like what an oasis is to all the people. An oasis is a place in the middle of the desert where desert dwellers and travelers often go to refresh, to unwind, to refresh their energy, to drink water, to rest in the shade. That's why this Pokemon has an entire oasis on its back. Kind of like how Torterra has an ecosystem on its back with a tree and the mini mountains and stuff. I went with the same concept for this Pokemon, except it's a large lake with a small river that leads to a different lake, which actually represents a lot of stuff, a lot of lakes from Israel. More specifically with the north, but we're sticking with the south for this one. Also, you'll notice that its back is now covered in palm trees, which is a common sight in an oasis, and its tail is now made of a succulent plant, which, just like an aloe vera, it's a very robust plant that doesn't really require a lot of water in order to survive, just like camel. Also, you'll notice that its eye is now fully healed, and it actually kind of looks like the directions of a compass, which again is a reference to Bedouins who are excellent trackers. Also, its ear is kind of meant to represent a car's side view mirror, because again, Susita, it was a car, it had side view mirrors, and camels ate these cars. So yeah, it's basically a camel, a car, and an oasis all melded into one. Also, if it wasn't obvious enough, this Pokemon is now also a water type. As you can see, it has a lot of water flowing on its body constantly. Believe it or not, camels actually drink dozens and dozens and dozens of gallons of water every time they stop for a drink. They just drink water and more water to help them, sustain themselves, because they have because they always travel long distances in the desert, and they need a lot of water in order to survive. So yeah, it kind of works for this Pokemon. So making a camel Pokemon water type isn't really that far-fetched, to be honest. And that's why this Pokemon is a grass type, just like some of the plants on its back, just like the aloe vera and the succulent. They store water inside their own body. Fun fact though, it's a common misconception that camels actually store all of the water inside their humps. That is completely 100% wrong. They don't store water in their humps, they store fat in their humps. And there's also a common misconception that they store the water inside their necks. That is also untrue. They actually keep all the water in their vascular system, so kind of like the engine of a car. It always has a steady supply of water running through it, cooling it, making it able to keep one going. Again, there's that car influence, just like a Susita. This Pokemon, like I said, it's a car, and it's a camel, and an oasis all at the same time. You'll notice that it also has a couple of berries falling from it. This once again goes back to the Bedouin folktale that I keep mentioning. The third Bedouin actually proclaimed that one of the bags of grains and seeds that this camel was carrying has a hole in it, and all the seeds and grains fell out of it. How did he know that? He noticed that there was a trail of ants in more or less a single file line picking up grains and berries that most likely fell from one of the bags that the camel was carrying. So this Pokemon drops seeds and berries wherever it goes, just like the camel in the Bedouin folktale. Also, everywhere this Pokemon goes, it leaves watery footprints with every step it takes. Kind of like when every time the Scorbunny takes a step, it kind of leaves a small flame wherever its feet touch the ground. Same thing with this Pokemon, except it's water. And every time this Pokemon steps on one of the fallen berries that fell from it, it plants it into the ground and water it. And that's basically where all the plants and greenery in the desert come from. This Pokemon plants seeds in the desert. Every once in a while, multiples of these Pokemon gather together in one place, plant a lot of seeds together, and those seeds eventually grow into an oasis. And that's how an oasis in the Molash region is created. By the way, just in case you were wondering, the merchant eventually went to town with all 3 of these trackers, and they were able to find his missing camel because of all the 3 indicators that they mentioned. It was blind in one eye, it didn't have a tail, and one of the bags of grains and seeds were empty. So yeah, this story had a happy ending. But let's move on to this Pokemon's ability. This is one of my favorites. Refresher. When this Pokemon's HP is really low, every time this Pokemon gets attacked, it sends out a burst of healing energy that heals itself and any friendly Pokemon with it in the battle. Again, like I said, double battles and triple battles are back. So if this Pokemon gets attacked, all Pokemon that's with it on the battlefield get healed. But here's where the real kicker is. This Pokemon not only heals its friendly Pokemon on the battlefield, it also heals all Pokemon all the Pokemon in the user's party inside their Pokeballs. It even revives fainted Pokemon, but only to 1 HP. To continue to heal them, this Pokemon has to keep taking hits. So yeah, this Pokemon has to take hits in order to heal its friendly Pokemon. But don't worry, while this Pokemon doesn't really have much in the way of speed, it more than makes up for it with its exceptionally high HP and defensive stat. So yeah, I think I did a pretty good job with this Pokemon, all things considered. I really like the idea that all 3 starters in Sword and Shield had a signature move that kind of represents what that Pokemon is based on. So yeah, this Pokemon also had a signature move called Refreshing Geyser. First of all, this Pokemon plants all 4 of its legs firmly in the ground and then unleashes a geyser of water from its nose because camels spit. Deal with it. A huge geyser of water out of its nose, kind of like Hydro Pump, which delivers a base 90 special water type damage to its opponent and changes the entire battlefield into an oasis like terrain, similar to the terrains in Sword and Shield, but a little bit different. This oasis terrain actually heals every single Pokemon currently on the battlefield. Grass and water type Pokemon get healed even more, so it's always useful to use this terrain if you're planning to use grass and water type Pokemon with you. Alright, moving on to the fire starter, and I think you guys are going to love it. Wybrawl, the wild bull Pokemon. This Pokemon is now far from being a small, smoldering trail of smoke that maybe has fire in it, and it's also very far from being just a regular old wildfire. This thing is now a fully formed wild forest fire capable of destroying and burning down entire ecosystems to the ground. Its name comes from wild, as in wild bull, and wildfire, brush fire, which is another word for forest fire, and obviously bull, because it's a bull. As you can see, its coat of fur is mostly made out of flaming blades of grass. We'll get to that later. Its horns and antlers now have barbed wire all over them. Why is that? Well, as I previously mentioned, bulls and other types of cattle live mostly in the Golden Heights in Israel, and they're mostly allowed to roam around freely, but there's also a lot of barbed wire keeping them from wandering away too far. And sometimes bulls get barbed wire caught up in their horns. For the most part, I kind of took inspiration for this entire family line from other bull-like quadruped creatures. For example, Smeal was mostly based on Tepig. That's why it basically looks like Tepig, but in a bull form. For Flattle, I mostly took inspiration from the bull-shaped piñata in that one episode of the Powerpuff Girls where they had a birthday, and you guys, you remember that episode, right? Where the piñata just grew to massive sizes and just started running through buildings like they were nothing, kind of like what Flattle does. Anyways, the main inspiration for this Pokemon is mostly taken from Atrocitus's bull. Now, long story short, you guys probably have heard of the Green Lanterns by now. But did you know there are actually more than just Green Lanterns? There's actually 9 different Lantern Corps. Specifically for the red one, their leader is Atrocitus, and the Red Lanterns use, and just like the Green Lanterns use willpower to charge up to give them strength, the Red Lanterns use rage. And that's more or less kind of the idea of this Pokemon. It's burning with rage, just like real actual bulls. And also the leader of the Red Lanterns, Atrocitus sometimes uses this huge, monstrous bull-like creature as a construct to kind of enforce his rule. And probably the most prominent use of this bull, outside of the comics obviously, is in the video game Injustice 2, and which is a game that I actually played a lot of hours in, and well, so I kind of decided to make this Pokemon's design kind of resemble that monstrous bull-like thing. That's why the shape of the horns and antlers kind of resembles the symbol of the Red Lanterns. Going back to its fur, this Pokemon is now a fire and grass type. You're sensing a pattern here, aren't you? Yasusis was grass and water type. Wybrule is fire and grass type. You can kind of already guess the typing of the water starter, but we'll get to that one in just a second. Anyway, why is this thing covered in a huge coat of flaming grass? Well, we'll get to that in just a second. Let's talk about this Pokemon's ability first. This Pokemon's ability is Raging Flame. Just like Yasusis, whenever this Pokemon's HP goes all the way down to the yellow zone, this Pokemon, unlike its predecessors, doesn't get a significant boost to its stats. However, every single time this Pokemon attacks, it causes some extra damage to all the other Pokemon in the opponent's party. And just like Yasusis, it doesn't just affect the target Pokemon, it also causes damage to every single Pokemon in the user's party, even if they're inside their Pokeballs. You can actually feint the opponent's Pokemon before they even enter the battle. But again, only when the HP is really low in the yellow zone. When it's in the red zone, it actually causes more damage, so be careful with that. This Pokemon's signature move is Charging Flame, not to be confused with Flame Charge. This is a completely different sort of charge that has flame on it. In any case, this Pokemon rubs its feet on the ground, similar to how regular bulls do when they're about to charge, and then it just charges at its opponent, just like the bull from Injustice 2, and it just smashes into its opponent, dealing base 90 physical fire damage to the target, and creates this whole flaming terrain around the battlefield. Very similar to the Oasis terrain, but not quite the same. This terrain, everything around the battlefield is burning, and there are burning leaves falling from the trees all over and all around, making even more fires. Every single Pokemon on the battle takes damage while this terrain is in effect, and obviously grass and ice types take even more damage. Water and fire types completely immune to the effects of this terrain. But still, what does all of that have to do with the grass type? Well, while this Pokemon is charging at its opponent, its grass-like fur starts to fall off, land on the ground, and ignite, and continue to ignite the area around it, creating a massive forest fire that burns down the entire area around it. However, once the fire is out and the dust is settled, all these blades of grass plant themselves into the ground, similar to the seeds from Yasusis, and then they help refurbish the land and grow back all the greenery that was lost during the forest fire. This Pokemon cares about regrowing the environment as well as destroying it. It believes that in order for an environment to truly flourish, it must be burned to the ground and then regrow, kinda like a phoenix. Anyways, 100 years ago, dozens and dozens of Wybrules went on a rampage and destroyed an entire ecosystem known as Sugar Mountain, which is an actual place in the game. After having destroyed the entire area, all the Wybrules felt an overwhelming sense of regret over the fact that they just destroyed their homes in their rage. So they decided to work together with humans in order to replenish the land and help the ecosystem that they destroyed grow back. And that's why they are giving out as starter Pokemon to help humans regrow the environment that they've destroyed. This story is sort of loosely based on the real-world forest fire in Mount Carmel that happened about 10 years ago. It was definitely a tragic event in Israeli history, but I really wanted this event to be represented in the game. I really hope I haven't offended anyone who lived in the vicinity of Mount Carmel at that point. I really hope I haven't offended anyone whose homes were lost and whose homes and source of incomes were lost during that event. Again, I'm just trying to be as respectful as possible. It's just an event that happened in human and more importantly Israeli history that I just felt it's something that should be represented in this game. Alright, now that that's all done, let's move on to the final starter the water starter, Krivenate, the artillery Pokemon. Its name comes from crab, river, grenade, and incinerate. After learning to fully trust humans and other Pokemon again, this Pokemon decided to be an all-out defender of justice and the people and Pokemon that this Pokemon trusts. As you can see, it still technically looks like a crab, but it's also kind of based on a tank. And before you say it, no, it is not a water and steel type, even though it's very easy to make that assumption. This Pokemon is actually water and fire. This Pokemon is not made of steel, it's just its exoskeleton. Crabs have a very rough exoskeleton. It kind of makes them look tough, but I assure you this Pokemon, while it looks like a steel type, it's actually flesh and bone all the way through. It just looks like a tank because, again, it's a water starter. It's a water type starter. It needs something to represent a weapon / warrior class. As you can see, its face is also covered in camouflage paint, and its eyes, while they kind of look angry, they also look like goggles, more specifically diving goggles. And why goggles? Well, when you're driving a tank, and more specifically Israel, you kind of need goggles because of all the sand that comes into your eyes. And believe me, I have driven tanks during my military service. It's nasty. Once again, it represents eye deterioration. Cluinch's eyes are wide open and perfectly healthy. Clanseaver's eyes are red and very watery because they were strained a little too much. And Krivenate is actually wearing glasses in the form of goggles. Also, those things on its back are actually barnacles shaped like grenades because, again, this Pokemon is a tank and it's known as the artillery Pokemon. It all fits! Its special ability is Stunner. Whenever this Pokemon is either poisoned, paralyzed, burned, frozen, or fallen asleep, this Pokemon lowers the accuracy of every single Pokemon in the enemy's party, even if they haven't even entered the battle yet. So basically, after they've entered the battle, they already entered the battle with low accuracy. And this reduction of accuracy continues to go on. Every single turn, this Pokemon has a status condition. Meaning, if you're using one, you might want to think twice about healing it. And if you're fighting one, you might want to think twice about actually giving it a status condition. This ability is kind of representative of a stun grenade, and its signature move is Bombs Away. Just like Yasusis, this Pokemon plants all of its legs in the ground, and then uses its front claws to grab all the grenade-shaped barnacles on its back, and just fling them at the enemy team, creating a massive explosion and dealing base 90 physical water-type damage to the opposing team. Also, even though it's a physical move, it doesn't actually make physical contact, just in case you were wondering. Also, after this attack is used, it creates a sauna-like steamed, foggy terrain around the battlefield, which confuses the enemy team and lowers their accuracy. But it doesn't affect the user's team, so it's a bit of a plus. Right, so this is basically all I have to say for now about these starter Pokemon. Again, this is just the beginning. This is just my first idea of these starter Pokemon. This is just stuff that I wanted to share with you guys. Again, there's still so many other details I need to work out. The map, the rest of the Pokedex, the professors, the evil team, the protagonist, the story, obviously, the legendaries, the box art legendaries, the mythicals, the post-game, all kinds of stuff that I need to work out, but still, this is just step one of this massive project that I decided to undertake. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys if you decided to watch this video all the way to the end. I really appreciate that. I realize this video is probably going to end up being very long, so again, thank you guys for choosing to listen to me, and I really hope you guys have enjoyed me talking about this project, and I really hope that I can one day make this thing into an actual game, into an actual Pokemon ROM that people can actually use, provided of course Nintendo doesn't hear about it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and hopefully I can have another update on this project sometime in the near future. So until next time, everybody, Pokeball, go! everybody. I really hope you enjoyed this video, cause I really enjoyed making it. So, if you like what you've seen here, please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more awesome content like this. So, until next time, guys, I'll see you guys next time.